Tonight's shiur, as always, Lila Nishmat Avi Maridov Merin Ruben Halevi Imi Marati Rachabat Harav Michael. And tonight we are going to talk, of course, about parshat Chayay Sara and the two salient stories that appear in parshat Chayay Sara. Both deal with Avram Avinu moving forward and getting ready to pass the torch to the next generation. So the first story we hear about the burial of Sarah, and now there's this huge gap. There's no matriarch. And the second story, of course, tells us about the arrival of matriarch number two. And that's what we're going to focus on. And we've already focused on that in past years, but we're going to try to focus it on it a little bit from a slightly different angle and try to understand what's going on in this story with Rivka. So first, I'm going to begin with just a little bit of genealogy as the Torah, just to show you how the Torah introduces stage by stage Avram's family, Avram's extended family. We begin in Parshat Noach, where Terach is described. It says Terach has three sons, Avram, Nachor, and Haran. Of course, Avram later becomes Avraham, as we know. Haran has a son, Lot. We read last week quite a bit about Lot. In the last 2 weeks, Lot has already vanished from the scene by the time we arrive at Parshat Chayay Sara. However, his sister, you'll notice that Haran, in addition to having Lot, has two daughters, Milcah and Yiscah. And Milcah is going to, at least through her descendant, is going to appear in this story. Milcah ultimately, as Nachor's wife, has a child who we read about very simply at the end of last week. The end of last week's parsha in Vayera, right at the end, after we get back from the Akedah, it tells us the following about Milcah and Nachor, who we haven't heard from since Parshat Noah. We heard about Haran, we heard about Lot. So, hang on a second. We heard about Lot. We've seen quite a bit about Lot. And now we're going to see the other branch of the family, which is the Nachor branch of the family. We're going to see what happens at the end of last week's parsha. We finally get back to Nachor. It says Avram is told that Milcah has also given birth to children to Nachor, lists 8 sons, and the last one is Betuel, and Betuel has a daughter, Rivka. And that's all we hear about Nachor and Milcah. And then we hear about Nachor has another wife who has 4 other kids, and that's all we hear about Nachor's family. So we have heard about Rivka, but we don't know anything about her until suddenly this week's parsha. But now, one of the most interesting midrashim is the midrash that describes Rivka's age. Rashi quotes it. We're going to get into it, and then we're going to see a slightly different opinion. Because if I were to take a poll of how old Rivka is at this when she meets Eliezer when she meets Avram's Eved at the well, I do that all the time. How old is she? Let's go. Let's hear all your answers. Who's going to say? Let me give a number. Come on.
3 years old. 3.
3. Everybody knows the medrash that Rashi quotes that she's 3 years old. Nobody knows the other opinion. Does anybody know any other?
14.
14.
14.
Thank you, Alan. All right, Alan. See, Alan knows the other midrash. The other midrash that she was 14. We're going to go into both of those in 1 minute, because it's Rashi says she was 3. It's wonderful. It's a nice midrash, but it doesn't fit the picture. This is not a 3-year-old young girl coming out and giving water. 14 sounds a little stretched, but a little bit more reasonable. So we're going to quote both of these midrashim, and then we're going to go into the story. Okay. Rashi says, and again, this Rashi, by the way, is not until next week. It's really in Parshat Toldot. In the beginning of Parshat Toldot, it tells us that Yitzchak is 40 years old when he marries Rivka. Now, if that were to happen today, a 40-year-old was marrying a 3-year-old, we'd have a lot of problems. Even if he's marrying a 14-year-old, it's not the greatest, but okay. Well, let's leave that for a minute. Okay, why does Rashi say? How does Rashi figure out that Yitzchak is 40? Because Harish Kishava, well, the Torah tells us he's 40, but Rashi wants to understand not how old Yitzchak was, how old Rivka is. Shari Kishava Avram Meharam Oriya Nitbasa Shanolda Rivka. Avraham, he learns when Rivka, when he at the end of the Akedah, he hears about Nachor having children, including Rivka. So presumably Rashi wants to say, and Rashi makes the conclusion that that was when Rivka was actually born, same time of the Akedah. And at the Akedah, Yitzchak Hayaben Shloshim B'Sheva Shana. Yitzchak was 37. How do we know Yitzchak is 37? Shavo Bovar Perak Meita Sarah. That was when Sarah dies. We know that right after the Akedah. Last thing we read last week, beginning of this week, is tells us about Sarah's death. Sarah's 127. And we should know what Yitzchak and Akedah should make the Sarah Shloshim B'Sheva Shana. Ubatishim Haito Kishanol Yitzchak. Since Sarah was 90 when Yitzchak was born, she's 127 when she dies. 27 minus 90 gives us 37. That's how old Yitzchak was when Sarah dies. Yitzchak is 37 years old. Chayay Sara. And if that's the same period of time, the same year that Rivka is born, Yitzchak Rivka. That's when Rivka is born. When Yitzchak is 37, so he's 37 years older than she is. So he waits 3 years and then he marries her. Now, it's a nice Rashi, does the math, all works out, except for the fact that, what does it mean? Himtin law. He waited for her. He didn't even know he knew she was born, but he didn't know she was who she was. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. We're going to skip this. We're going to go to now the next. Now, here's the other midrash, which Alan mentioned, okay? Yitzchak ben Arboim Shana. This is Zikdat Tekeinim Balei Tosfot quoting a different school of thought in terms of Rivka's age. Perish Rashi. Rashi gave the explanation. Shnasi Yitzchak et Rivka shehaita bat shalosh shanim. Okay, that Rivka was 3 years old when she married Yitzchak. Bikasha. That seems problematic in light of a different midrash. The B'shilei Sifri. In the Sifrei, it says the following: Masik Gimel Shenoteim Shavim. There were 3 people who lived to the same age. They were the same age when they died. Who are they? They are Kahat, Rivka, and Ben Azai. 3 people, 3 different generations, 3 different times, who seem to have no connection whatsoever, except that the Medrash says they all lived to the same ripe old age. And the only one of those that we know from the Torah how old they lived is Kahat. The Imkain, Haita Rivka Kuf Lamed Gimel Shana, 133 Kmo Kahat. If you look in parshat Va'era, where this Moshe's genealogy, it tells us that Kahat was 133 years old when he died. So if that's the case, that Rivka is the same age as his, she's got to be 133 when she died. The Imlo Haita Kim Bat Shalosh Shanim Kishanasa Yitzchak. If she was only 3 years old when she married Yitzchak, we're going to have a problem with the math. 11 years are missing. Ketzad, how does that work out? If Bat Gimel Shanata, she was 3 when she married him. Now we know that Yitzchak is 60 when Esav and Yaakov were born. Very clearly, the Torah tells us that. So it's 20 years after they're married. So she's 3 when they get married. She's got to be 23 when she becomes a mom. Ketzad Bat Gimel Nasa Bat Chaf Gimel Haita Kishiyolda. Okay, the Im came. Kishiyolda at Yaakov, Shana, right? We just said she was 23 when she gave birth. She gave birth to twins. They're the same age, 23. The Yaakov ben Samach Gimel Keshenit Barach. The Pirish Rashi B'Sofa Seder Razeh. If you look at the last Rashi in parshat Toldot, he will explain how the fact that Yishmael's lifespan of 137 years is given specifically so that we will know that Yaakov was 63 years old when he got the bracha from his father and had to run away to Lavan. How do we know that? Because Yishmael was 14 years older than Yitzchak, and if he's 137, he's got to be 123 at the time. He's 60 years old in Yaakov. Yaakov is 63. The Yud Daled Shana Nidban Beveit Aver, and 14 years Yaakov was learning in yeshiva before he got to Lavan's house. So therefore, he was 77 when he got to Lavan. Paf Shana Shimesh Beveit Lavan, 20 years in Lavan's house makes Yaakov 97. Ushtei Shanin Nishta B'derech, 2 years on the way home makes him 99. Uba Oto Perek, when he's on his way home after 99, when he's 99 years old, Oto Perek Nitbaser Al Mitat Imo. That's where he hears that his mother died. Now remember, all of this is not written in the Torah. The only thing that's written in the Torah is that Yitzchak was 60 when Yaakov was born. He was 40 when he married Rivka. That's it. The only other time we have anything about Yaakov's age is when he gets to power when he's 130 years old. And Rashi, based on that statement that he's 130, says, wait a minute, that means he couldn't have been, he had to be 77 when he got to Lavan's house based on working backwards. And he gets this comment that he was 60. But either way, if he is 130 when he gets to Paro, he gets to Egypt, and that's after 22 years that Yosef was separated from him, and you work it back that way, you also get to this a similar thing. And therefore, if Yaakov, as we just said, is 99, and Rivka was 23 when he was born, that would have made her 122 according to that Cheshvan. If she died when she was 122, she didn't die when she was 133. So we're 11 years is missing. So there was only 122. We got 11 years missing, so we have to add 11 to 3 to get the fact that she was 14. Therefore, Li Nira. Therefore, it appears to me, that's kind of says, I'm going to take the second midrash that makes her 14 when she got married to Yitzchak, because it seems to make more sense that this whole story could happen to a 14-year-old rather than a 3-year-old. The Hachi Ita B'Seder Olam, and that's what Seder Olam picks this medrash rather than the other one. Then you get to 133 and it works out. And according to this, by the way, Datskin says, okay, what was the whole fact that Rivka was 3 based on? That she was born when the Akedah happened. That he finally heard something that had happened 11 years ago. Why did it take so long for the news to get there? I don't know. No, I forgot. Oh, I forgot to tell my brother or that I had a granddaughter. I have no idea why. Okay? Well, there was no internet, social media, right? Nothing. How did he find out? I don't know. Why did it take him 11 years to find out? I have no idea why, but it did. Okay. Okay. And now I'm going to leave the rest of this. Das kind of thing gets into a whole discussion of the halacha that says that we normally, that in the olden days when they did the Su'in and Erusin separately, when Erusin and Su'in were two separate halves of a wedding, that they would give a betula 12 months. And we supposedly learned that out from Rivka, which he says that's problematic because she was no longer an hour. She was already a Bogeret if she's 14. But I'm going to leave that. We'll go. That's a whole different discussion for a different time. Okay, so let's get into our story. This is chapter 24, which basically is the middle of the second Aliyah through the end of the fifth Aliyah, as chapter 24 in Breshit. It's the story of Avram's servant, who is the primary character in this part. We've talked about his perspective of this story in the past, so we're going to really gloss over that. But basically, we all know the storyline. The storyline is very simple. Avram calls him in, says, you got to find a wife for Yitzchak. Can't be any of the locals. Got to go back to where I come from and see if you can find somebody. And he says, wait, what if she doesn't want to come home? Can I bring Yitzchak there? He says, no way. She's got to come with you. Otherwise, all bets are off and you don't have to bring anybody, and you can find her wife somewhere else. Find him a wife somewhere else. Okay. And he agrees to do it, and he goes on his way. And when he arrives at the well, again, this is one of 3 very interesting well stories of beating at wells. We know, of course, that the Eved is going to meet Rivka at a well. We know, of course, that Yaakov later on is going to meet his wife, one of his wives at the well, and ultimately Moshe Rabbeinu is going to meet his wife at a well. All 3 interesting stories. We talked a little bit about the contrast and compared those 3 in past Divrei Torah. But Eliezer, I get it again, the Eved, Avram's Eved, says, God, I need a little bit of help here. I don't know anybody in town. I have no clue what's going on here, but I'm at the well. Now, one of the problems we in the modern age have is understanding the importance of the well in the story. Because we live in an age of hot and cold running plumbing into every single place we are, and we don't understand this whole concept of people have to go out to the well. It was a requirement. Unless you had a well in your backyard, which, again, most people in the Middle East seems to not have had. There was a common well for the whole neighborhood because there wasn't a whole lot of water underground. And digging for wells was not something that was easily done in this neighborhood, in this neck of the woods. And so it appears, as I said, that going to the well was something that had to be done. And yet, the whole story doesn't make sense because in general, Who would come out to the well? Not the people, not the householders. They'd send their slave out. Slave would be the one who would go out to the well. The last person that he wants to marry Yitzchak is somebody's slave. Come out to the well. Secondly, I don't know about you, but I know that when I carry those 6 gallon jugs of water, it's very heavy. It wasn't the girl female servants who were going out to be the water carriers. In general, it was the male who were carrying the water. So his whole request is a very, very off base request because he's asking for a female to come out to be drawing water who's not a slave, who's not a servant, who is an actual member of one of the households who he thinks is going to be suitable for Yitzchak. So again, it's a very, very strange thing, and that's perhaps why the Gemara, when it discusses this whole story, says, wait a minute, maybe his request wasn't such a great request. Even though it wasn't a great request, Hashem still gives him a good answer. The Gemara says that, it wasn't necessarily an appropriate request. However, it's a shortcut. He takes it, and of course, it works. We all know the story that it works. So when it works, it's a good idea. If it hadn't worked, it would have been a terrible idea. And I just gave you some of the reasons why it's not such a great idea. Okay. But the interesting thing, and the Torah exactly tells us, by immediately upon him finishing his petition to God, immediately, Rivka comes out. And who is Rivka? And the Torah introduced her again. Now, we've already know. I just told you. We read above. Rivka was born to Betuel, who was who Milcah had to, and not with Nachor. But again, when it introduces her, it gives her her whole thing. Asher Yulda Betuel ben Milcah Eshet Nachor Achi Avraham. Gives her whole connection to Avraham, to us. Even though we already know that. All that said was Rivka. Okay, I could have said Rivka bat Betuel. Didn't have to say this whole intro. But it does. And by the way, it's interestingly enough, later on when Rivka is introduced in parshat Toldot as Yitzchak's wife, here she's introduced as the person who comes out to the well. But later when she's introduced as Yitzchak's wife, it's the same thing, that she has a father, a brother. It's interesting that the Torah always connects Rivka back to her family. I think it's one of the interesting things about Rivka. Whenever she's introduced into a story, and as I said, it happens 3 times. It happens once when she's born, it happens here, and then it's going to happen again when she's introduced as Yitzchak's wife, that she gets, again, connected back to her roots. And the Parshanim Rashi suggests in Parshat Toldot, that the reason is to tell us to show us the greatness of Rivka, that even though she came from this, not necessarily the greatest upbringing or the greatest stock, she was able to overcome all that and was willing to move forward and accept a whole new lifestyle. Okay. Now, Princess Zion is also a strange pasuk. Anara Tovat Mareh Ma'od. She was very beautiful. Betula. She was a virgin. Ishlo Yada'a. Gives her all these different intros, which again seem strange and out of place, perhaps, because we're really not interested in who she is. We're interested in whether she's going to give him water or not. But Terin, I know she goes down to the well. She fills up her water receptacle, and she comes up. And of course, we know he runs to greet her and he says, "Give me some water." Now, the next 3 psukim are the 3 psukim that are going to be the focal point of the story, where Rivka takes center stage here. This is the only time in the story she's going to take center stage, is these next 5 or 6 psukim, and then she's going to virtually disappear from the story, except for one more word at the end. Okay, so first she says, "Here, have a drink." So not only does she say, "Have a drink," but she lowers this jug. Presumably she was carrying it on her shoulder because it was heavy. And she lowers it to him and gives him to drink. And then she finishes giving him to drink. She says, not only that, I'm going to draw water for all of the camels until they finish drinking. Again, we don't have any idea how much the camels were going to drink. Irrelevant. But she's willing to do this because of whatever reason. Again, she goes down and goes down to, again, where the water is. She draws more water, and she draws water for all the camels. Now, the interesting point of all of this is this Vatachalash Koto. First and foremost is her response. Okay, now imagine. Okay, let's even imagine that she's come out. She's come out to draw water. Maybe she came out to just take a stroll. We don't know. But presumably, if she's got a water receptacle and she came to the well, she came to at least get herself a drink. And she sees this guy. He's got 10 camels around with him. He's got a whole bunch of people with him, and he has the chutzpah to ask her for a drink. I mean, think about it. Come on, what would your response be? Who is this guy? Why is this complete stranger coming up to me and asking me to give him a drink when he's got his whole entourage, his whole people there? What am I? They can't draw water from the well? What are they, a bunch of weaklings here? But she doesn't say that. She immediately responds, here, have a drink. Okay? Now, Ma'am Lois brings down a very interesting perspective on this. He says very simply, once she offers him a drink, she's got a dilemma. She has a major problem now. He just took a drink from her pitcher, her water pitcher, and now she's got the rest of the water in the pitcher. What's she going to do with it? She's got a major. If she brings it home, what if he had what if he's sick? And I'm going to make everybody at home sick by giving him this water to drink. Okay, who knows what he has? I mean, this complete stranger at the well, right? So what she does is she pours it into the trough for the camels to drink. It's an easy solution. So to get rid of the water. That's what Ma'am Lois suggests. That's why she immediately doesn't even ask him, do the camels need water or not? She immediately pours it into the trough and says, here, let the camels have something to drink. That's her solution to making sure that she doesn't have to take any potentially contaminated water back home. Interesting thought, just thought. But anyway, he's watching her to know what's going on. And when they finish drinking, now comes another part of the story, which we're, again, familiar with. It says, he takes a ring, nose ring, could be a earring, a nose ring, whatever, both called nezem. And two bracelets that would go on her hand. How much? It's very interesting. Firstly, that the Torah tells us what difference does it make how much they weigh. Who cares? What are we going into a jewelry class here? Do we need to know the weight of the gold? So that's when before she will all say, oh, you have to understand that the two tzmidim and the Asara Zahav are an allusion to the Shnei Luchot and the Asara that he brought. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense. The Torah would give us the require. Who cares? Why is it Beka Mishkalo? Again, to allude to that same concept of Beka Lagugolet. That in the midbar, when we count people, when we do a census, we're going to take Beka Lagugolet. It's nice midrash, but it really begs the question, why does the Torah have to give us this detail? Does it really matter? And then he says, we're going to go through the parshanim in terms of, are these two psukim in order or not? Okay, we'll get to that a little later, because again, that will give us a little bit of insight into what he is thinking. What is his perspective on this? Is he sure that this is the right one, or is this jewelry that he's about to present her, or does present her? We don't know. Does he present her before he asks her or after he asks her? We'll see how the parshanim deal with that. Okay, and she answers him. So he asked her two questions. He asked, "Who are you? Tell me who you are." And two, is there room in your house for us to spend the night? That's all he asked for is one night. He doesn't say we're coming. We don't need a bed and breakfast. We just want to stay overnight and go back home. She says, we have, and interestingly, she says first, she answers the first question. I'm Betuel's daughter. Who is Betuel? He's the son of Milcah that was born to Nachor. Now it's interesting. She traces it back to Nachor. Why does she have to do that? Don't know. How does she have an idea that the stranger would have any clue who any of these people are? Don't know. Have no idea. But that's who she was. But she answers the question. You asked me who I am? That's who I am. And then she says, by the way, we've got plenty of provisions and a place for you to stay overnight. No problem. And then he, of course, thanks Hashem that he got to this place. And then she has one more play. She runs after this interaction where she hears him say, oh, blessed be Hashem, the God of my master Avram, that she knows now that he is somebody who's related to Avram. And she immediately runs and tells everybody in her mother's household. Okay, tells them the whole story, and then she disappears from the story. Okay, she's finished. She doesn't appear again except at the end. Now, at the end, she's going to appear, as I said, for one word. She's going to have one more word to say. Well, Rivka Achmush
She
Lavan. Now,
says
Rivka,
Elef.
I'm sorry. Yes, Telech is one word she's going to say. Correct. Well, Rivka Achmush Lavan. Now, Rivka has a brother, and his name is Lavan. Okay, we all know Lavan. We only know him. Why? Because we meet him later on in two parshat from now in parshat Vayetze. He is going to play a rather significant secondary role in parshat Vayetze. But let's assume we never heard of Lavan before. Okay, he's introduced as Rivka's brother. Vayaratz Lavan elo ish achutza elayin, and he immediately runs out to the well to this guy. And we're going to skip the next pasuk for 1 minute, and then it says, what does he say? What does he do when he gets to the guy? Come in, you are blessed by God. Lama tamo bachutz. Why are you standing outside? Anochi piniti abayda. I've already cleaned out the house. Umakom lak malim and made room for your camels to come in. Okay, now let's, as I said, we left out a pasuk in the middle. You're right, but if you read those two psukim, what's your perception of Lavan? Good guy, bad guy, intermediate? We don't know if, don't have enough information yet. Okay, and yet we have the middle pasuk. Okay, now what does the middle verse say? When he saw the jewelry on his sister's hands, and I guess the ring wherever he saw it. When he heard Rivka's words saying, "This is what the guy said to me," then he goes to the man. Now it's interesting. It says first he says Vayaratz Lavan. First he runs, and then he gets to the man and invites him in. So again, if I were looking at these psukim in a vacuum and I didn't know about Lavan from Parshat Vayetze, I would say, hey, look at this guy. He runs out to do chesed. He runs out to welcome him into the house, right? He heard the whole story, okay? So the question is, how are we going to interpret what Lavan does? Okay, it's the next question we're going to try to answer, okay? And then basically the rest of the story is they come in the house, he tells the whole story, right? He says, I'm not going to eat anything until I tell you the whole story. He tells them the whole story. They say, oh, okay, Hashem yatzah davar. It's, got to be from God. You just told the whole story. You prayed to God. She came out. End of story. And again, notice she's not there. She seems to not even be there when they're telling the whole story. Here you can have her. She'll be a wife. And he says, great. Okay, they go to sleep. He gives them a few presents, and then they eat and they go to sleep. And they get up in the morning. He says, "Okay, I'm ready to go home. I want to take her with me." They say, "Wait a minute. She's got to prepare her trousseau. She's got to prepare all this stuff, get ready for her wedding. Then we'll go. Let's stay party a little while." She says, "No. I'm going right now." And what do they say about Let's call her and see what she wants. And here's her last word. They call Rivka and they ask her, will you go with this person? She says, I'm going. Okay. And they send her, and then the rest of the story is the rest of the story. So the couple of things that we need to understand firstly is Lavan's part. And by the way, interestingly enough, why is Lavan running the show if he's just the brother? Where's the father in all this? And by the way, he does appear. Betuel does appear in one verse. It says, Vayan Lavan Betuel Vayomru. Lavan and Betuel answer, and they say, oh, this is from God. Okay, interesting enough. Now, we would have expected who to be the one to answer? The father, not the brother. Why is the brother suddenly the shadchan here? Why is he the one who's taking over the roles? So we would have expected Betuel. And later on, when he brings out gifts, it says he gives gifts to Rivka. He gives something or other to Lachia Ulima. He gives to her brother and her mother. Nothing mentioned giving anything to the father. Okay? And the same thing the next morning. When he was ready to go, it says Vayom Achia ve'ima. Her brother and her mother say. No mention of the father. So we're going to try to address some of these questions in the time remaining. Okay? So let's start with this one, as I said, this is the Klei Akar. Says very simply, which I think I already pretty much mentioned. Yesh Omrim. There are those that say Omer sheyazmin lo Hashem naroch hashuva she'ein darko latet kalal. His prayer was that Hashem should specifically make it so that somebody who normally wouldn't go out to fetch water is going to come out. Okay, so again, he's asking God for a real miracle here. We often take this for granted. Just God, okay, make sure the girl who comes out. But when we look at the fact that A, girls didn't normally go out to fetch water. B, people in the household didn't fetch water, especially if they had servants around to do the water fetching. So the fact that she's going to be the one to come out is he's really asking God, I really need your help. It's not just, give me a little help. It's I need full help. Okay. And Claire brings proof by the fact that he has to ask her who she is because nobody had a clue who she was because she grew up at home. She was homeschooled, home raised. Nobody even knew who she was, even the other people hanging out at the well. Okay. Now, let's get back to Lavan and whether we should be giving him the benefit of the doubt or not giving him the benefit of the doubt. Rashi already has looked and he's studied Vayetze. He says, if Lavan's coming out, there's an ulterior motive. It's not a pure motive. Vayaratz, and Rashi says very similar. He says he ran to the man. Vayaratz, why did he run? Almaratz. What's he running for? He says that verse in the middle where it says that he saw the jewelry, that's why he ran. Amar, why did he run? Ashir huzeh. This guy's rich and famous. He's got money. He's throwing around jewels like they're growing in like they're water here. But Natan Eina b'mamon. And since Lavan, the most important thing in life is my financial statements, I better see if I can rub shoulders with this guy. Maybe some of it'll rub off. That's Rashi's perspective. Okay, we're gonna let's go back now to the other perspective, which is the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Okay. Well, the Rivka Ushmo Lavan. The Or HaChaim starts this with a very, very interesting because firstly it says Ushmo Lavan, okay, and the Or HaChaim quotes a midrash. Midrash Rav that says the following: very mazal. We have the following midrash. She'amru that says Ki hatzadikim shmam kodem lahem. That when it introduces a tzaddik for the first time in a story, it says Ushmo, whoever it is. And he gives the example of the book of Ruth where it says Ushmo Boaz. We say that Naomi had this relative and his name was Boaz. V'shemo ish Elimelech. In the story of the birth of Shmuel, he's introduced as the man is a guy who comes from a Matayim Sofim. No, I'm sorry. Shmuel Elimelech. Shemo ish Elimelech. I'm sorry, that's also from Ruth, the book of Ruth. He is again who Shemo ish. Aval harishayim. When it comes to introducing a wicked person, Haim Kod Mim Lishmam, they precede the name. No, it doesn't say Ushmo blank, it says blank Shmo. Dichsiv Novel Shmo. By the way, just FYI, I went through all of Tanakh very, very quickly and found that this midrash, it's a nice midrash, but it doesn't hold water. Okay? There are plenty of people who are introduced as Ushmo blank, who are certainly not people we want to emulate. And there are a few people, the phrase blank Shmo only appears half a dozen times in all of Tanakh. Okay? And four of them are, two of them are Goliath, Goliath Shmo. He gets a double mention, Goliath Shmo. But some of the others, I forget who the others were, who are certainly not in the, one is Yoshiyahu or Yechizkiyahu Shmo. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily hold water that this midrash is guaranteed absolute. So I just want you to have that in the back of your mind. But again, Or HaChaim is using that to say that it's introducing Lavan as though he were righteous. Imkain lama lakacha because of seder atzadikim Lavan Arasha. Based on this midrash, when it says Ushmo Lavan, it tells that Lavan is doing something good here. He's a tzaddik at this point in the time. Maybe later on he's going to become a Rasha. We don't know, but now he's a tzaddik. In order to understand this, yesh la'ir b'katuv omro vayarat lamarat. Why did he run? What was he running for? Chazal amru v'sharat hanezem natan einav b'mamon. Now they add, it's not just that he saw the jewelry. That's not enough. The fact that he saw the jewelry and ran out is not enough. The fact that he saw the jewelry and runs out because he is a money grabber or a person who worships money or whatever it might be. So therefore, it says they wanted to Dayan caution. It doesn't answer the question. Imkane, if the whole reason he's running out is because he wants to see this guy who's got all this money, that it should have said first, oh, he saw the jewelry, he ran out, and then later on, as he's running out, his sister's telling him the story about the jewelry, how she got this jewelry. But the jewelry, if the jewelry is the key thing that's making him run out there, it should have said he saw the jewelry and then he ran out. Why does it first say he ran and then he sees the jewelry and hears the story? And even so, why does it say that he ran twice? He runs out to the well and then he sees the jewelry and he hears her story and he runs again, or he goes out again. It seems that what the Torah is trying to tell us here, he's running, he's very anxious to go and find out who this guy is. He wants to know what happened. Wait a minute, where'd you get all this jewelry from? He suspects there's a little things going on under the table here. He doesn't trust. The who ish nachri, he's a guy. What does he think has happened? You messing with my sister, man? Who do you think you are messing with my sister? I'm gonna get back at you. Hey, we don't do that here. The Ratzli Kwartoliv Goabo between Ato et Kinat Achoto. He wants to make sure that there was nothing going on between this guy and his sister because he suspects, wait a minute, where'd she get this gold from all of a sudden? So he's very, very suspicious of this guy at first. So therefore, he's ready to run out and tackle this guy, basically. Because he's willing to go out for his sister's, to protect his sister, for his sister's honor. That's why he gets called Ushmo Lavan, not Lavan Shma. That's why it says, oh, he's going out as a tzaddik to protect his sister. He does a righteous act. The Hashem doesn't hold back reward from anybody. So if you're doing something that's righteous at the time, you get treated as though you were righteous always. Before he heard the story, when he first just sees them, he suspects Eliezer of doing something inappropriate here. Aval, interestingly, by the way, or Chaim said Eliezer, so I can say Eliezer. Only after he sees the jewelry, but not seeing is not enough. He hears her story. Then shavapo. Then he calms down. Oh, that's what happened. Oh, it's a different story. I got the story all wrong. Now he calms down. Even though he's now calmed down, he's not going out there to beat the hell out of this guy. Nonetheless, he goes out to greet him, Lola Hara, and he doesn't even want to harm him. He goes out to greet him and welcome him in, because now he knows that he's coming with an honorable mission. He has no problem with it anymore. Whereas before, beginning, he suspects something a little bit less than that. So it's interesting perspectives of the Orach Chaim in terms of why the Torah phrases his running out this way it does. Very, very different than Rashi's perspective. Okay. Now we're going to get into the whole question of, did he give her the jewelry first, or did he find out who she was first? And we're going to go through a number of parshanim on that, because I think that's a focal point in the story, it also is a focal point in the selling of the story, in his ability to convince the family. Remember, Eliezer's mission is not only to find the girl, but to convince the family and the girl to go back without sight unseen, without meeting the groom, to go back and marry him. So that's another aspect of this whole story that's kind of an undercurrent in the backline. Okay. Simple text means Vayikachu ish nezem zahav u'shnei tzmidim biyado latet aleha. Says Vayikachu ish nezem zahav. He takes this nose ring and he takes the bracelet. Doesn't say what he does with it. He says he takes it. Doesn't say he does anything with it. Okay, he takes it. He has it in his pocket, ready to go. The imtiya haguna, if she's the appropriate person, then but he's going to find out first. When she says, "Oh, I'm from Nachor's family," and then he gives her the jewels. The verse doesn't specifically say, "Oh, by the way, after she told him who he was, he gives him the jewel." As we find in many places, that the Torah gives us a hint to the story at the beginning, and then later on it omits that detail from the story because it's already given us the hint that it's going to happen, or vice versa. Torah will fill in a detail that should have been filled in above later on in the story. And the proof that he asked her first and gave her the jewelry later, when he tells the family the story, he says, first I asked her, then she told me, and then I gave her the jewelry. And similarly here, even at the beginning of the story, it says he takes this jewelry. It doesn't say what he does anything with it. Just he takes it. He had it ready to give her if. Okay, now the reason this is important is because according to those opinions, and we'll see a couple more. Let's go to one or two more here. Rashbam says, now Rashbam says when he takes it, it means he gives it to her, but it's out of order because it didn't want to interrupt between his question and her answer and what happened afterwards to say, oh, by the way, he prepared the jewelry after he asked her the question. Okay, that's why it says he prepared the jewelry, then he asked her, and then it doesn't mention him giving it to her. Okay, or it does according to Rashbam. I say that according to Rashbam, it when he takes the jewelry, it's as if he gave it to her, but it doesn't want to say a specific sense that he gave it to her because it didn't want to interrupt the story. So it says he even though he asked her first. Okay. Okay. Ramban. Okay. The verse simply doesn't say. The verse should have said he took the jewelry and he gave it to her, right? Ramban goes to the again opposite Rashi, who says that he gave it to her first, and opposite Rashbam, who says he gave it to her first. It said, I'm sorry, Rashi, excuse me. He says that the perush is he took it out to have it ready to give to her. By Yom Alan, he asks her who he is. Allah, after she says, "Oh, Bat Betuel Anochi, Sama Nezem Atzmidim," then he gives her Kasher Amar Lahem as he told them when he tells them the story. Avochoter Kan Hanesina. The Torah does not say that he gave her the jewelry. In other words, in the actual story as it happens, okay, it says very simply that he prepares the jewelry, he asks her who she is, she tells him who she is, and then the story continues with him thanking Hashem. It doesn't explicitly say that he gives her the jewelry, which he had prepared. But later on, when he relates the story to the family, it fills in the blank by telling her, oh yeah, after she told me who she was, I gave her the jewelry. And Ramban wants to say that that's a very, very common occurrence when relating narratives, that the Torah will leave out a detail in one part of the story because it's going to tell us it later or it told us earlier. Many times, and there are many other places, especially in Bereshit, where this type of phenomena happens, that a detail is left out and then added later on. Okay. Okay. Chizkuni. I'm going to end with Chizkuni because I'm running out of time already, getting later than I thought, as usual. Okay. Clearly, the verse never says that he gave it to her. It says he took the jewelry, but it doesn't say he gave it to her. He took the jewelry. He took it. I guess he took it out of his jewelry pouch or wherever he had it. Maybe it was his saddlebag, the saddlebag on the donkey, on the camel. I have no idea. Latate al yoda im tiyahaguna, as we saw before. If she's going to be appropriate, we'll give it to her. Beka mishkalo shekel chaluk lishnei chatzoyin l'shonot ted. Okay. Beka means half a shekel. That's all he's just explaining where the line of word beka comes. Vayomer brought ni'at. When he translates Vayomer and he said, he says, no, ukbar amar la bat ni'at. Kodem shenatan la klum. He takes the jewelry and has already asked her who she was. That's the way he translates these two psukim, to put them in the proper context. And similarly, as we saw above, that's exactly the way he tells the family. Now he gives the flip side. He gives her the jewelry before he has any clue who she is, not because of anything except that he wants her to understand. You did me a favor, you gave me water. Here you have something to show that my master, I'm a servant to somebody who is a very, very generous guy. You did me a very nice favor. You gave me water. Here, I'm giving you a gift. No strings attached, nothing else attached. That's another way of looking at it. That none of the parshatim other than this thing. Of besipur hadvarim, but when he tells the family, Amar shelo natan la bat mi'at, he changes the events around. Why does he have to change the events around? Lomar shelich vodam natan la. Oh, when he found out she was from a distinguished family, that's when he gave her this gift, not before. In other words, had she been from a nobody family, he seems to imply she might have gotten, might have been maybe a copper bracelet, maybe something a little lesser, but she's from an important family, I better give her a gold gift. That's and he wants to impress upon them the fact that he considers them a honorable family. Okay. Okay. Okay, the rest of this is not that important. Okay. And now we get to one other question. Oh, I forgot. There's another question I forgot I got to address here. Where's the father? Who is, we know Betuel, he appears once. Okay, but in the next morning when they get up, right? It says, Vayomer achia v'ima, her brother and her mother say to her, what? They say, oh, well, let's wait a month. Let's wait 10 months a year, give her time to prepare her trousseau. And he says, no, I'm going. Rashi asks, Betuel hefan haya. What happened to her father? Where did he disappear to? Who haya rotel liakev? He did not want to give her permission to go, according to Rashi's shot, which is quoting the Midrash. He wanted to hold back. And an angel came and took him out of the picture so that he wouldn't be there to prevent her from going. Rashi's shot. And by the way, Sifachon elaborates on the Midrash that Rashi is quoting. They slipped a little bit, and this is the Midrash he's quoting, they slipped a little bit of poison into the servant's food. That's why they said as soon as he walked in, they said, come on, sit down, have something to eat, because they wanted to get rid of him. Okay? How does, by the way, interesting enough, Sifachon wants to know, where does the Midrash get this idea of that they wanted to knock him off? It's written with two yuds. There's only one other time in the Torah where that word appears, and that is that he was put in a coffin. Afkan Cain, so it's to hint. They wanted to get rid of him and bury him. He felt something was wrong. They're rushing me to eat. Let's take it slowly here. Let me tell you the story. Let's get business taken care of. Then we can sit down and eat. Okay. That the angels, kind of the dishes got switched around and they played musical dishes. The dish with the poison ended in front of Betuel. He ate it and And that was the end of Betuel. Nice midrash. Kiskuni has a very different perspective on what happened to Betuel that I want to end with. Okay. Okay. Where are we? Okay. Okay. At the beginning, before they go to sleep, the night before, he gave gifts, some minor gifts to her brother and her mother. He didn't have to give Betuel anything. Betuel didn't need to be appeased to allow her to go. Samach haya shenatan bitoli Yitzchak ben Dodo. Very different perspective on why Betuel doesn't get anything or doesn't appear in the story. He has no problem whatsoever. He's very happy that, wow, my daughter is going to marry my cousin. Okay, my first cousin Yitzchak is going to marry her. Wow, what a great shidduch. I'm all for it. Her brother and her mother asked for an extension to get her bread. He's the one who's related. Betuel is the one who comes from Nachor, not the mother. She doesn't care. She's not related to this Avram character and his son. She doesn't care. But Betuel, who is his first cousin, he wants to push the shidduch. Go for it. He's all for it. They agree only because of the fact that he paid him off. Or perhaps because they realized that Yitzchak was so proud that they wanted to. Okay. And then he quotes the midrash that they wanted to give Eliezer some poison, and Gabriel comes and switches the plate. But okay. Okay. Adavar acher. Very final word from Chizkuni. B'nei Doro karushmo Betuel. Why was he called Betuel? Al Shem Shabetulot Kulam Nivalot Lo Techila. He was the regional governor. And one of the things was, when you got married, your wife had to sleep with the governor first. Hey, you do it to all our daughters, you got to do it to your daughter too. And he was okay with that. Therefore, brought Gavriel Vahargo. That's why Gavriel had to come and kill her. Different version of why Tuel had to be removed from the scene. A nice way to end the Dvar Torah with a very interesting, common, unfortunately, all too common practice in many old societies that were ruled by despots. That the despot had his choice of maidens, females who he wanted to sleep with at any time, at any place, at any point. But we find that very not only foreign but repulsive. But unfortunately, there are many societies. There were throughout history many societies where this was unfortunately the norm. Again, I think the point I'm trying to make of the whole story is that there are minor characters. I talked a little bit about Betuel. I talked about Lavan. We talked about Rivka, who isn't. I won't want to call her a minor character, but in this story, as it plays out, she seems to have a very minor role. The primary driving force in this whole story is Avram's Eved, and we'll call him Eliezer, as all the Parshanim do. But he is the one who is taking the bull by the horns and driving the story and driving it home in a successful manner, as befitting the trust Avram placed in him. It's very interesting that Avram places complete confidence in him, and he carries it through, and he does get the job done. And we move on to the next generation where, as of course, the end of the story, Rivka comes home, meets Yitzchak, and they get married and live happily ever after, at least until next week's parsha. So at this point, I open it up for questions, comments, or feedback. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, none? All right, thank you all. I hope got something out of tonight's shiur as always, and Bezrat Hashem, we will see you all next week.